Okay, guys, it's 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and start. So this meeting still will probably only take about an hour, plus or minus a few minutes. I want you to feel free at any time to interrupt me and ask a question. I have no problem with that. Make a comment on something you agree with or disagree with, and we'll talk about it, because that's what learning and nutrition is all about, especially nutrition. But what I'm going to do at the beginning, because I didn't get to cover much of this last time, this is only our second Zoom meeting. We have 7 of these throughout the semester. So the next one I think is coming up in a couple of weeks, but this is the last one before your first major grade, which is test number 1. Now, I don't think, of course I'm speaking for myself, that that's anything to really worry about as long as you have your study guides done. As I've mentioned numerous times, if you work the study guides, you're basically working the test. You have 90 to 95% of the test already done with the answers right there in front of you. And you can use the study guides while you're taking the test. Trying to take the test without the study guides would be really difficult. If somebody has a question, I see where somebody raised their hand. Just interrupt me and ask a question if you need to.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to ask, because I was having trouble with the study guides with the accept questions and the not questions.
Right.
I know, like, I was just, how are we supposed to go about answering those?
Well, I agree with you, and I understand what you're talking about. Do you have the study guide in front of you? Maybe you could read me one of those questions? Because I know there's a number like that. If you don't, that's okay. I can kind of explain the reason they're designed like that. Now, there are a handful that are like that. Most of them aren't, but there are some. It may say vitamin C. I know this question's not on there, but I'm just using it as an example. Vitamin C is all of the following except, and you have no idea what they're talking about. The best thing to do on a question like that is just write down, jot a few notes about vitamin C, like it's a fat-soluble vitamin, and some other things about vitamin C, because those questions are actually designed to encourage you to look in the book or become somewhat familiar with it. Although it doesn't give you the exact answer, it kind of gives you a guide. Do you understand what I'm talking about on that?
I do. So kind of just have a general knowledge, because I was just putting kind of the paragraph it referenced in the study guide, so that way I can reference that paragraph.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. That's absolutely a good way to do it. Now, keep in mind, everybody, you have 2 chances on these tests. So let's say you bomb the first one. You won't bomb the first one if you have the study guides. But let's say you made a B and you want to make an A. Well, then, take the test again. Now, the questions are randomly selected from the test bank. So the chances are you're only going to get about half the questions on your second attempt that you would get on your first attempt, because they're randomly selected. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. But like if you do the study guides, have references that you can relate to, have your book there beside you or your ebook, you'll be okay. Actually, I don't even think you need the book or the ebook as long as you have the study guides, but it might help. So there's a question that's rather vague on the study guide, but it's answered exactly when you take the test. The exact question will be there, and you might want to look some of those up in your book. Now, you're not going to have time to look every single one of them up in the book. That's the whole point of doing the study guides. I have had students tell me, hey, I didn't do the study guides and I just used the book and I did okay. Well, I wouldn't use that as a guide, because these are rather, if you like you're exceptional and you can do that, you can give it a shot, but then I actually don't think that will work. The majority of your time in this class is probably spent working the study guides. Like I said earlier, don't work them alone. Work them with somebody, or you do one, they do one. You email them to each other. You can message in Canvas to other students. You can compare answers on the study guides. I have no problem with that. All the study guides are available for you. And our first test is next week. So that's the chapter 1 test. But what I want to do now, I'm going to do a little screen share. That's bad English. Do a little screen share. Anyway, I'm going to show you a couple of things that I think will help you for the test, and then we'll get into a little bit more into nutrition. I think I'm going to go over some stuff I think you will find quite surprising. So anyway, let's do a little screen share. I don't know, do you see my big old screen here with somebody running? You guys see that? Make sure you can see it. Somebody tell me.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, that's just my screen thing. Okay, so what I want to do is, I'm going to have to open a different browser because I'm leery that the browser I have will close this meeting. So give me a second here. And this won't take long, this part of it. Okay, like I said, I teach 3 sections. It doesn't matter what section you're in. And now remember, this is a regularly scheduled meeting. And so I'm going to give you the 3 codes, or the first code, in just a minute. So you get 15 points just for attending this. And some of you guys are probably looking at your grade and going, wow, I have 160% or 180%. You know, that's good, but that means you probably did, completed the bonus assignment or discussion that we had, or you completed some of the sound bonus. So that's going to bump your average way up. That's because we haven't had many points yet. So as we go along, you'll say, wow, I just made an A on an assignment, my average went down. That doesn't really mean anything. It just means we had more points. And so the points count less throughout. But having the bonus points is a good thing, because then you can maybe mess up on a test or 2, and then you have some bonus points. We've had 50 so far. And remember, as I mentioned in an earlier message, there's still the water memory bonus quiz. That's worth 50, another 50, and that's open the entire semester. And that's a very interesting video. Of course, there's a little quiz associated with it, only 10 questions, but they're pretty simple. So let's say you only got 6 of the 10 right. Hey, you would still get 30 bonus points. It doesn't count against you. You might want to check that out, you know, as far as bonus points go. But then again, that's open the entire semester. So let's look at, let's just pick one of these 3 classes here. Now, when you go to the home page, scroll over here to modules. Everything is in modules. Now I have right here, the second module down, all recording Zoom meetings current and past. That means this class as well as previous classes. I'm pretty decent with video editing, so I edit these videos like the one tonight, kind of tweak them a little bit. I don't think anybody knows how to do this. I do. Anyway, it's because I know programming pretty well. But anyway, I'm not bragging. Compared to computer programmer, I probably don't know diddly squat, but compared to people that teach regularly, I probably do. Doesn't mean they don't know how to teach or know their subject. They do. I mean, just because somebody doesn't know how to program doesn't mean they don't know anything. It's just computer programming is very different. But I happen to know nutrition and programming. So in this, when you go to this, all these little boxes right here, all the meetings, these are the ones we haven't had yet. For example, this is today. So when you click on that, you go to this, you go, whoa, there's nothing here. I upload it to my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel hasn't been taken down yet. I'm not political, so they won't take it down. I'm apolitical. People ask me, are you Republican or Democrat? I just go, neither. I don't vote. I know that's terrible, but I just don't follow politics. But anyway, let's go to, if you go to this, all Q&A and other meetings, right here, now this has already been recorded. If you go down here, say Zoom Cloud recording, Q&A, question and answer session. This is from previous classes, chapter test number 1 review. I recorded this on September 21st, I guess that was last semester, is here. And so when you click on this here button, then it takes you to this video, which is Zoom. It's recorded on the Zoom Cloud. They always say cloud, but it's just Zoom servers. And if you click this video, it's 51 minutes 41 seconds. You can fast forward it, but there's all kinds of hints in here um, on, see, I can see I use the same background. All kinds of hints in here for the first test. See, I'm just kind of scrolling through this here. That's me not knowing what I'm doing. So anyway, that is, once again, let me go back to that. That's right here. You might want to take a look at that because actually I show you the actual test. Not all the questions, but a little bit of it. But I'm going to do a little bit of that tonight too. So for a few minutes, let's go. Now remember, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. And you're probably thinking, wow, I didn't have time to view any of that. But remember, it's recorded. It'll be posted by tomorrow. So if you want to view it, you can go to this or the modules, go to this date, and you can view it and view it really slowly and watch it again and go through the things, because some of the actual questions are randomly pulled up will be the exact ones or the same ones that are on the test. People always say the exact same. I do the same thing. You just say the same ones or the exact ones, not the exact same. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. So let's go to quizzes. So the quiz you're getting ready to take next week is test number 1, right here. Now, so it even tells you this chapter is 1 through 3. So 3 chapters and spotlights A and B. That's 5 study guides. If you, so let's see, Rosalinda, if you would, can you turn your camcorder off? Thank you. Thanks. Bye. And I'll let you turn them on when we have questions and stuff, anybody that wants to. I'm going to take a look at this because it says 95 questions. That tells me that the first couple of questions are going to be the same no matter what I do. So I'm going to preview this. Now remember, this is being recorded. So even though I'm going to go fast, if you don't catch it all, watch the recording tomorrow and you can get the part that you missed. Preview means, okay, let's just take a look at what the preview is. So now this is exactly what you're going to see. I mean, you have 2 attempts. There's 95 questions and it's worth 200. So that tells me question number 1 is, and I'll review this again tonight, no matter what, if you take the test twice, this will be question number 1 and it's worth 10 points. So I'm telling you right off, this is exactly, that's why there's 95 questions, because this first one's worth 10. And the other 94 are worth 2 points each. Yeah, I think that adds up. But anyway, this is what you'll see. You'll see, okay, carbohydrates, select, and you're gonna have to choose an answer. A carbohydrate, we talked about this last time, is a plant. So you're gonna choose plant material. So take a look at this again, know what carbohydrates, fats, proteins, water. Some of this is pretty simple, but carbohydrates are plants, fats, I can tell you right now, I know this by memory, are fatty acids. Proteins are, anybody know, 2 words? I'm looking for 2 words that describe proteins, and you can just blurt it out. Starts with an A, you guys know it. Proteins are made up of what? Amino acids. And then water, what is water? Very small molecule, I can tell you. That's what, it's not one of the 3 food groups. This is tricky. Water is dipolar, not bipolar. That's a comedy thing. Bipolar means somebody's, I mean, they're one way one time and one way another time. Dipolar, water's dipolar, which means it has a positive charge on one end and a negative charge. So anyway, the answer to that is they're very small molecules. Vitamins are coenzymes. There's 13. That's the only choice right here. Minerals are inorganic. Inorganic. Organic is a term that's thrown around rather loosely in nutrition. It doesn't mean anything. I know they use it to sell things. They'll say organic, organically grown, and people say it's healthy. But the definition of organic just means containing carbon. And so everything's organic that was alive, and everything that's dead that used to be alive is actually organic. But inorganic are like rocks. They don't contain carbon. Phytochemicals are just chemicals in plants. And we're going to talk about these three terms tonight, which we did a little bit last time: hormesis, apoptosis, and autophagy. So that will be the first question. But then again, you see it right there. And it's going to be easy to figure out, because when I give you these three, this will be easy to answer. I think it's a free 10 points. And that's the first question that you'll see on the test. So let me go out of screen share and go back and talk a little bit about, let me give you the first code. So if you got a pen or a pencil, make a note of this. So at the end of this meeting, you can take the little 3 code quiz and get your free 15 points. So the first code is 356. So everybody write that down, 356. And you'll take that. You can go to modules, and in modules, it'll say, you go to modules on the left and go to this week's module. It'll have the Conference Zoom video quiz, and you click that and you just take that little quiz. So the first code is 356. So once again, work the study guides, have your book. You don't necessarily have to have your book beside you, but if you work the study guides, I don't think you'll even need 2 attempts. But some people like to have that extra attempt just in case, and I have no problem with it. Like I said earlier, the second attempt will have that same question on it also. So I want to spend a little bit of time, guys, talking about some of the aspects of nutrition that I don't think you may hear about them other places, but I'd be surprised in most nutrition classes they actually discuss this much, because I've been guilty of this myself too, is getting too hung up on memorizing a bunch of facts and details and stuff like that. That's interesting to know, but I don't think it really means that that person knows a lot about nutrition. You have to be able to put the parts together to understand it. So if I have a little bit of a review from last time, and I can't help it because nutrition overlaps a lot with itself. It's hard to talk about one thing without talking about something else. So briefly, once again, there are only, and I know we've discussed this to a degree, there's only 3 food groups: fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. There's not 5, there's not 7, there's not 8. Even though the current government website lists 5, they list dairy as a food group, which is a joke. That's still up today. It says dairy is a food group. Dairy is not a food group. You can do perfectly fine without dairy. Yet millions of people look at that and get their nutrition information from it. It's just, to me, it's insane. Your body only recognizes fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. And there's some debate as to whether carbohydrates are even necessary. Now, I wouldn't analyze that too much, because your body can make its own carbohydrates. That's called gluconeogenesis. Your body knows how to do that. But remember, carbohydrates are basically plants, and plants are healthy. So I wouldn't say avoiding plants is a good way to go. But once again, going back to dairy, dairy is there's some evidence. Vegans, remember, a vegan doesn't eat anything that comes from an animal. A little bit of a repeat, but a vegan doesn't eat anything that comes from an animal or an insect. So a vegan obviously doesn't have dairy. A vegetarian doesn't eat meat. And there's some debate, is egg meat or not, but it's kind of just semantics to argue something like that. And then they throw the term ovo and lacto, ovo meaning egg, lacto meaning dairy. All these ridiculous terms: ovo, lacto vegetarian, ovo vegan, flexitarian, which is a ridiculous term, but it's in the books. It means you're flexible. You can eat whatever you want. That's a real term. It doesn't even make sense, but they throw that in there. Pescatarian, which means they don't eat meat, but they eat fish and things like that. But anyway, guys, what I want to talk about, and somebody just said we're going to do a group chat. Yeah, we're going to get into the question and answer section in just a few minutes. But I want to go over this, and then we'll discuss it here a little bit. And then people can, ask questions or ask questions of each other a little bit. But the three terms that I showed you earlier, I want to touch on so you can have a bigger understanding of nutrition, or a better understanding, are autophagy. You don't need to write this down. Well, you can make a note of it if you want, but it's autophagy, A-U-T-O-P-H-A-G-Y. The other one is apoptosis, A-P-O-P-T-O-S-I-S. I think we touched on this a little bit, but not much, if any. So autophagy, I've heard it pronounced autophagy, but it's autophagy, A-U-T-O-P-H-A-G-Y, apoptosis, A-P-O-P-T-O-S-I-S, and hormesis, H-O-R-M-E-S-I-S, H-O-R-M-E-S-I-S. If somebody, I don't care what degree they have, I don't care if they're a PhD or an MD or they have no degree at all. I don't care if they're a registered dietitian or not. If they do not really understand those three terms, I don't think they really have a complete understanding of nutrition and what's going on in the body. And let me explain why you need to understand those three terms to understand nutrition. I'm going to start with the first one. Well, I don't know, whatever one you wrote down first. Let's start with apoptosis and try to pronounce it as apoptosis. Think of two words, apop and tosis. I've heard it pronounced apoptosis, apoptosis, and all kinds of things. But the guy that won the Nobel Prize for apoptosis, he pronounced it that way. And so I thought, well, that's the way to go. There's been a couple of Nobel Prizes awarded in this area. In fact, there's 2 research journals that are dedicated to apoptosis. Now, the reason you need to understand this is because you have to look at the big picture. The definition of apoptosis for the test means programmed cell death. So you might want to make a note of that. 3 words, programmed cell death. Now, we are nothing but cells. Every part of you is a cell. Even the liquid parts, red blood cells. I'm not talking about things that go in and out of your body like water and food, but what you're made of it's all cells. Your bones are cells. Your immune system is made up of cells. Cells live and die many times. Some nerve cells only live and die once, but most cells live and die many times. And we live and die once. Cells are actually programmed to die. It's in the DNA, the double helix. There's genes that tell the cell to kill itself or commit suicide. Every cell has this, including some nerve cells in the brain, well, all cells actually, that only live once. So why would they be programmed to die? Because they can't make copies of themselves. So it seems like when they die, that would be a bad thing. But cells that become old, diseased, cancerous, those genes that they're called apoptotic genes will turn on like a light switch, and they tell the cell to kill itself. It's a complex process. It's well understood. But the cell, what it does, it breaks into little capsules. And these capsules are reabsorbed. It's kind of like recycling. That's apoptotic cell death. Another way a cell can die is necrosis. You don't need to know that, but necrosis means traumatic cell death, like chemicals or the cell's cut or bruised or poisoned. And that cell dies dramatically. Necrosis, it spills its guts, it kills surrounding cells. That's very damaging. You cut your skin, that's necrosis. But skin cells that get old or cancerous that are programmed to die, they die peacefully and they don't damage the surrounding cells. Without this process, you would only live a few days. You would be riddled with all kinds of disease and cancer. In fact, how many cells do this? It's a mind-boggling number. The number is astounding. Well, how many cells are in the human body? Depends on what book you read, but I've seen numbers anywhere from 10 trillion to 100 trillion. But regardless of the number, I don't get too hung up on numbers, is about, and this is pretty well understood, the numbers, there's some range, about 50 billion cells in your body commit suicide every day. That's called apoptosis, programmed cell death. Where does this happen? Everywhere, not just on your skin, because you can see that, but it happens inside your body. Your heart cells do this. You have a new heart about every 4 years because heart cells will die and other ones make copies of themselves. And somebody said, why do you have a new heart every 4 years? Did you have a heart transplant? Say, yes, I did. One cell at a time, but you did. This even happens in the brain to a degree. So they've found some cells in the brain, called neurons, that can actually replace themselves. The old school thinking was that the cells can't replenish themselves. Most can't, but some can. The spinal cord's a little bit of a different issue. Most can't in the spinal cord. But anyway, this is apoptosis, 50 billion per day. Well, if you want to extrapolate that to seconds in a day, etc., that's about a million cells per day. A lot on the skin, some internal, everywhere. So it says my internet connection is unstable. Now it's back. But anyway, a million cells per second. That's incredible. Well, of these million cells, the rough estimate is that about 1% of them are cancerous. Now that's not many, but 1% of a million is 10,000. Did you know that in your body, every second, approximately 10,000 cancer cells kill themselves automatically? They commit suicide. All it takes is for one of those cells to survive, and you got a problem. It makes a copy, you got 2, you got 4, you got 8. And then when you get to about 1 million cancer cells, that's a lot. But cells are so small, that's like taking a pen and putting a dot on your finger. That's about 1 million cells. So cancer, by the time it's got to 1 million cells, with something you can see, is fairly big. And that's only on the surface. Inside of you, it might be 1 billion cells before you form a tumor that you can feel or that's causing problems. Apoptosis, programmed cell death, is very necessary for survival. Anything that interferes with apoptosis leads to cancer, disease, autoimmune diseases, accelerated aging, you name it. All kinds of bad things happen when you inhibit or slow down apoptosis. Now, you don't want too many cells to die. That's accelerated apoptosis, but that's usually not the problem. It's usually that too few cells die. Now, you really have to think deep or outside the box to really understand this. You don't have to be a scientist or a PhD in molecular biology to understand this. But this is kind of an eye-opening statement, but I stand by this statement and I believe it's 100% true. Normal blood glucose level inhibits apoptosis. Now think about the power of that statement. What that means is that if you keep your blood glucose level normal or blood sugar level normal, which a lot of doctors promote, a lot of people promote, keep it normal, sounds healthy, but that inhibits apoptosis. What that means is unhealthy cells tend to hang on longer than they should, and they don't commit suicide as often as they should. Why does that happen? Well, all the cells in your body, including cancer cells, use glucose. All of them. But cancer cells are gluttonous. They're like pigs compared to the other cells. They take in 200 times as much glucose as a regular cell. That's why they are so dynamic. They divide and they eat your glucose and they spread because they've evolved to be that way. They take 200 times as much. Well, what happens when you drop the glucose level? Not dangerously low, that's hypoglycemia. It's not going to go to 0. I've never heard of that. Your body won't let that happen. If it gets so low, you could pass out. That's not good. But when you allow glucose level to drop somewhat, these cancer cells don't have as much glucose, and they have not evolved to using ketone bodies. They tend to die off much faster than regular cells. Studies are showing this all over the place. Glucose level needs to oscillate, which oscillate means go up and down, because in a low blood glucose environment, apoptosis runs more efficiently, and cells that are stressed can't handle low blood glucose. Well, what kind of cells are that? The ones I just mentioned, the old, the weak, the diseased, the cancer cells. They can't handle stress. But healthy cells absolutely can handle it. They won't die. Just like stress doesn't kill a healthy person. You've heard the phrase, stress that does not kill you makes you healthier. There's some truth to that. But this happens with people too. And you hear this phrase a lot. You guys may have heard it. They still promote it. Keep your blood glucose level normal. Eat 6, 7 little moles a day. Are you guys still hearing that? Do people actually still tell you that? Somebody can volunteer that they've heard that lately. I believe you, because I've had students tell me they hear that all the time. Doctors still promote that. Keep blood glucose level normal. That's not the way you want to go. And that's going to bring us, and we'll go into a little bit more into why that is. But that brings me to the next definition, which was on the test, that first question, and that was hormesis, Hormesis. Hormesis just simply means stress that causes strength. And I say causes strength, or strength/adaptation. Stress, that's what hormesis is. Stress that causes strength or has a positive adaptation. Any of those will work. You'll recognize it right away when you match it up, because the answers are so far off that if you just kind of halfway know it, you'll be able to get it. And that's what hormesis is. And you need hormesis to make yourself healthy. You have to have that stress. And nutrition is no exception. As we mentioned, I believe in the earlier one, how do you make your heart stronger? You stress it, you work out, you run, you get on a treadmill, you walk. That's stress, that's hormesis. It makes you stronger. How do you make your muscles and bones stronger? You lift weights, you walk, you do whatever. But that's stress. That stresses your muscles and your bones. How do you make your immune system stronger? The holy grail of medicine. You get sick. Having the flu is hormesis, or having a cold is hormesis, because you build up the antibodies, which is stress. Getting the COVID-19 vaccine is actually hormesis, because it actually gives you there's several different variants of it, but it allows you to build up antibodies so that you're protected from the actual virus when you get it. That's how a flu shot works. But hormesis is no exception for any system in the body. I mean, they've studied it with all kinds of things. For example, in vision, where one eye is weaker than the other. Everybody has that. As you get older, it gets worse. Your dominant eye tends to take over. They've done a lot of studies that if you temporarily patch the good eye and force yourself to look with the weak eye, even though you won't see as well, the weak eye starts adapting. It's under stress with the muscles and the neurons, and it functions better because it's being forced to use what it hasn't been used for years. It's been kind of relying on the other eye, and so that's hormesis. You're stressing your weaker eye, but there's no exceptions, and nutrition is not an exception. Stressing the body is healthy, as when you talk about fasting, the last video we had, and there's others coming up related to that. Well, how do you do this? And you do this by spreading your meals out. I don't mean eating a bunch of little meals. I'm eating bigger meals, but less often. The more time you have between meals, the healthier you're going to be. Common sense applies. You don't want to overeat. You don't want to undereat. You want to eat healthy things, fruits and vegetables, but that's 7th grade nutrition. You learn that. But the time between the meals is by far more important than what you eat. That's kind of shocking when people hear that, but that's true. Now, common sense applies there. You can't just eat McDonald's every day and say, I got a lot of time between the meals. Well, you need a variety of foods. And there's just an overwhelming amount of research in this area. And that's the way to go. When I taught anatomy and physiology, I would point out organs that showed through evolution, the gallbladder being the main one, that this was the way to eat. But we've got out of this. We for some reason, people believe you got to eat 3 meals a day. That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And they still believe you got to have breakfast. It's important. That again is also nonsense. It's neither more important or less important. That's been debunked. The people still promote it. They still believe it. They got their kids believing it because the kids are brainwashed, because kids don't know better. They just believe what parents tell them. If your kid's not hungry, don't make them eat. To me, that's child abuse. I don't care if they're overweight or skinny. That has more to do with heredity than it does nutrition. 80 to 90% of your weight as an adult is determined by heredity, not what you eat. Now, what you eat has an effect. It'd be stupid to say that it doesn't. You can actually be somewhat overweight and be healthy, just like you can be thin and be unhealthy if you don't eat right and smoke. And that's a fact. Skinny people can get diabetes. Overweight people don't necessarily have diabetes. It's only correlated with it. And we're going to talk about diabetes a little bit more here. So that's hormesis. The other term that I mentioned of those 3 terms is autophagy. A-U-T-O-P-H-A-G-Y. Autophagy. Autophagy is related to hormesis, but autophagy, I'll give you a 2-word definition. It doesn't really cover it, but for the test, it covers it. It means self-eating. Now, Nobel Prize was awarded in that area also. The way I want you to think about this, and that's why I want you to look at the big picture. Before a cell commits suicide, apoptosis, think of a cell as like a living person. It's kind of defective. Maybe it's not cancer, but it's defective. So you drop glucose level, and that cell is right on the verge of killing itself, apoptosis. There's a process that cell goes through before it kills itself, and that is called autophagy, self-eating. The cell doesn't eat itself, but it recycles its own waste products. It's a semi-complex process, but they know that this happens. And that has to do with the lysosome of the cell, which is kind of like the guts of the cell. It's sort of a recycling area of the cell. And waste products that are built up inside the cell, like unfolded proteins and all kinds of things, are actually taken back and recycled. That cell actually becomes healthier. Think of it like, when I say an example, like a person, you say, oh, you're defective, you kill yourself for the better of society. Well, that person would say, hey, let me try to improve myself before I commit suicide. And that's what a cell, I'm not using it, and I don't take that literally, but that's what a cell actually does. It improves itself before it commits suicide. And that's called autophagy. There's videos on that later on in this class, but that's a very interesting and dynamic process. Autophagy also takes place in a low blood glucose environment. It doesn't happen at a high rate with normal glucose, and with high blood glucose, it slows down a lot. So once again, low blood glucose is a way to go for hormesis and autophagy, and these weird shadows in the back of me are very necessary for survival and health benefits. Now, a few myths, and then we'll get into a few discussions here. Let me give you the second code, guys, because I want to try to keep this about an hour today. The second code is 362. So make a note of that. The second code is 362, and I'll give you the third code here in a minute. Some of the myths that you run across that are still out there, I've taught almost every class you can think of. I've taught classes with trainers, like athletic trainers and personal trainers. That's a good field to go in. You can actually make a lot of money. Some of them know quite a bit about it, some don't. Doesn't mean they're dumb. Ignorant doesn't mean a person's dumb. It just means they don't know. So that when you fast, the body eats itself. It eats its own muscles. That's been studied. It doesn't. They've even studied a 30-day fast. Does the body eat its own muscles? They found that you lose maybe a half a pound of muscle because there's no storage place for amino acids in the body, but that's at most. So just not eating for a few days, you do not lose muscle. That's the complete myth. If you're starving to death, you're on the verge, you haven't eaten in 2 months, and you're going to starve to death. There's some weird things that happen in your body where it could feast on itself to a degree. But the only way, I mean, think about how stupid that statement is that people say your body uses muscle for energy. There's no way that would happen. The food has to get in the stomach, be converted to glucose, and get into the bloodstream. How does a muscle, which is the fibers of a muscle, get into your stomach or somehow magically end up in the bloodstream as glucose? It doesn't. What happens when you don't eat for several days or you lose weight? Fat cells shrink. They shrink. We have about, the average person has about 140,000 calories in fat cells. That's a normal weight person. 140,000 calories stored in fat cells. That's about 70 days worth of excess energy, extra energy. 70 days, not 70. That's 2 months worth. Well, where do you have these fat cells? Everywhere you have skin. Underneath your skin, it's called subcutaneous. About 50% of your fat cells are subcutaneous under the skin. Everywhere you have skin, nose, face, feet, everywhere. And you got skin everywhere. And anybody that's ever gained weight or lost weight knows what I'm talking about, because you lose it everywhere and you gain it everywhere. So what happens is when you overeat and you're not burning the energy, is that it's converted to fatty acids and it's put in fat cells. Which fat cells does it put in? All of them. And so when you need fat cells for energy, which ones release energy? All of them. It makes no difference what type of exercise you're doing. And that's another myth that's kind of promoted to a degree a lot at these workout places. Is somebody will go in there and say, oh, I want to lose weight around the stomach. And they'll say, okay, do sit-ups and crunches. I mean, that's a good exercise, but you don't lose weight around the stomach by doing that. If you haven't eaten for a while and your fat cells are now supplying energy, all of your fat cells supply the same amount of energy regardless of the exercise you're doing. So the fat cells around the stomach in that area, that's called visceral fat, they shrink, but so do fat cells everywhere else. Let me give you an example. So if I go to a workout place and I say, this finger, it's obese, right here. And so I want to lose weight right here. They'll tell me to do finger crunches like this. This finger over here is not obese, so I don't need to do that. So if I start doing finger crunches, just like a person doing sit-ups, I have fat cells under the skin here. These shrink, not much, because this is not many calories. But so these fat cells shrink. That's true. But the fat cells in this finger right here, they shrink the same amount. I lose weight in both fingers at the same rate. So what's the difference? This finger will be more buff at the end of the day because the muscles get a workout. So it's a muscular workout for definition and those kinds of things. But weight loss is uniform throughout the body. And you can notice that you lose weight in your fingers and your face. You're like, I don't want to lose it there. I just want to lose it in the stomach. You can't. There's no such thing as spot weight reduction. It does not occur. Now, there are some exercises that burn more calories, which means all your fat cells will shrink quicker, and there's some that don't. So, but the body draws from all the fat cells uniformly, and the body puts energy, or trans fats, or they're actually fatty acids that are stored in fat cells. It puts them in it when it stores it for use later on. Fat cells are kind of like a curse left over by evolution. They're one of the things that point to eating every day is not really necessary, because we evolved fat cells where people couldn't eat for weeks. Our ancestors, hundreds or thousands of years ago, and we didn't die, hence fat cells. But it's a myth to think that a particular exercise causes you to lose weight in one area, even though that's the body part that's moving. It doesn't work like that. The muscles do work like that, but that's a different type of workout. So that's kind of a myth that's promoted. Another myth I think we hit on last time is protein doesn't build muscle. Muscle cells called fibers, muscle fibers, they're still cells. They use glucose for energy, so does every cell in the body. And they are made out of protein, but so is almost everything else in our body. Eating extra protein just doesn't build muscle. To be deficient in protein is virtually impossible. There's a disease called kwashiorkor. It's almost unheard of in this country. It's almost unheard of worldwide. It's different than marasmus. You don't need to know this, but marasmus is starvation, not the same as kwashiorkor. Kwashiorkor is where like kids will have a distended belly. That's usually from fluid retention, like edema and things like that. Nothing wrong with protein either, because you lose weight with protein because it's not converted to glucose very efficiently, because you don't get a lot of energy from it right off. And they'll try to sell you things like protein shakes, protein powders. Nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't build protein. But then again, if you're trying to lose weight, that's probably a good way to go. I've seen people say, well, when I have this candy bar, this shake, this sports drink, or I feel more. They'll promote protein bars like that, like LA Fitness. I know they do that. And people will take them and they'll say, wow, look, it's building muscle. Look at me. That's because they work out a lot. But I think what happens is if you eat that protein bar, it has some glucose in it also, that you have more energy. It raises glucose level, which means you have more energy to work out. So you work out longer and you work out with more intensity. That's what builds the muscle, not the food you ate. That just gave you the energy to do it. And that's another session. We'll go into this. Anybody that does weight training, I've taught weight training for years. There's so many myths related to that. It's just amazing. There's some evidence now, quite a bit of evidence, that when you lift weights, when your blood glucose level is low, not so low you can't work out, but you get more muscle hypertrophy. You get more muscle building than when even though you don't feel as good, than you do when glucose is normal. Now, people will tell you the opposite. Oh, you need energy, etc. Well, only if you're in competition. But that's hormesis. That stress is actually causing the muscles to adapt more. The more stress you can put in the workout environment, stress that you can handle, the better the workout will be. It's kind of sad to think, wow, I need more stress. I don't feel as good. Well, that's true. But that's what happens. That's why when you haven't worked out in a while and you get on a treadmill, you're breathing hard. Oh, it's terrible. You feel like quitting. Well, if you keep doing that, your body says, I don't like this. And so what happens is your body adapts, because you're putting yourself under hormesis. It adapts by making your heart stronger, getting you used to it. And so all of a sudden you're not under stress. Your body does not like being under stress, so it adapts. So that's what hormesis is. It's just necessary for health. Another myth I wanted to address is the myth of bad food, good food, which we touched on last time. So if I'm repeating myself, it's hard not to talk about this, like I said, without some overlap. You hear this a lot. What's a bad food? What's a good food? I think that's the wrong way to look at it. There's no such thing as a bad food, and there's no such thing as a good food. Don't get hung up on that, because food doesn't change. It's not the food that's bad or good that determines whether the food is bad or good. The food's always the same. An apple's an apple, a hamburger's a hamburger. It doesn't go from good to bad. It's the same. People, what changes is people and their glucose level. Whatever food you eat when glucose level is low is good for you, because it's not going to raise it abnormally high. It's going to be converted. It's not going to be put in fat cells, etc. Whatever food you eat when glucose level is normal is bad for you. I don't care if it's fruits and vegetables or a salad. If your glucose level is low, normal, and you eat it, it's going to raise it up. So that will end up in fat cells. It'll raise blood pressure, heart rate. Now, not a lot, because that food doesn't have high. It's not high in calories, but that's not. I don't think the right way to look at the food. You have to examine when you ate last and what your blood glucose level is. I know this because when I taught at Cal State Northridge, I'm retired from there now, but at nutrition, we were having dinner, and the head of the nutrition department, here we are at nutrition, and we're eating at a Mexican food restaurant, which I like Mexican food, by the way. So it was in the evening, but I made sure I didn't eat breakfast or lunch. And we were having a discussion with her, and she said, I can't believe we're doing this. And I said, because everybody's eating the same meal. And I said, yeah, but that meal, I was joking with her, I can do this with her. I said that meal is going to mess you up, but it's not going to mess me up. And she said, how is that? We're eating the same meal. I said, because my glucose level is low and yours is normal because you had lunch, right? And she kind of laughed. She said, yep, I did. But she didn't know. I had to actually explain what kind of the way to look at whether that meal was good or bad. Now, that doesn't mean you can eat Mexican food meal every day, as long as you only eat once a day. You need a variety of food. I'm not disputing that, but that's the proper way to think about nutrition. And this is true for kids too, especially kids that are overweight, trying to lose a little bit of weight, that if you can get them in the habit of eating 2 meals a day, eventually they may go to 1 meal a day. Sometimes kids can go all day without eating. They're not even hungry. And the next day they'll really be hungry. It's almost impossible to starve to death unless you voluntarily do it. Anorexia can do that, but it's not really with kids. Teenagers can do it, but that's, you're choosing to do that. That's a psychological thing that's going on there. A kid starving to death would be like them, dying because they don't have enough water. They'll get so thirsty that they'll drink anything, and you'll get so hungry that you'll eat anything. And so to worry about, they didn't eat today. Well, you can go 60 days, so I wouldn't worry about a day or two here and there. I just think that we get too hung up on individual things. If somebody tells me that it's unhealthy not to eat for a day, this is what they really mean. I get a headache, I don't feel good, I can't function, I don't have any energy, I can't perform at my job. I believe that, but that's not a sign of unhealthy. That's a sign of an addiction. That person is addicted to eating every day and having their blood glucose level normal. And so when they try to not eat, they have all these symptoms. That's hormesis. If you stick with it, those symptoms will go away. You will not have a headache by skipping a meal. You won't have all these things. You can work out on days you don't eat with high intensity. I've just known people that have done it all the time. In fact, after people say, on the days I don't eat, my workout I'm better at it. But it takes a while to kind of get used to that. It's just not that easy to do. Okay, guys, I want to spend like 10 minutes here just briefly going over, because I just think it's important to understand this. And we touched, like I said, a little bit on it last time. Diabetes. Now, I'm just going to give you a little bit of opinion. You don't have to agree with it on that. And then we'll do a little, anybody has some questions, you can interrupt at any time on this. I don't expect you to know this, but I'm going to address the bigger picture. Diabetes is just high blood glucose. That's the definition of diabetes, high blood glucose. The way the books explain it, and doctors and the way they teach it in medical school, is they'll teach you there's 2 types, type 1 and type 2 diabetes. That's the way they do it. Well, that's a ridiculous way to do it. Because first of all, say you don't understand temperature. And I said, I'm going to explain temperature to you. And this is the way I'm going to explain it. Did you know there's 2 types of temperature, hot and cold? And that's all you know. But you go out today and you go, ooh, this is kind of in between. And I said, oh yeah, there's a medium temperature. And then you go, well, like in the summer, it's very hot. And then sometimes it's very cold. And then you say, hey, that guy lied to me. There's all kinds of temperatures. There's a whole range of temperatures. This is true with diabetes. There's a whole range between type 1 and type 2. So now they're going to type 3, which is actually Alzheimer's. They're coming up with a type 4. Nobody's exactly type 1 or type 2. You're usually in between. They just use this as sort of a guideline. And then there's pre-diabetes. It's just, you might be diabetic, but you might not. That's a term they throw around a lot because that's the way doctors are taught. Now, just remember, diabetes means high blood glucose. Type 1 is inherited. Basically, your pancreas is not producing insulin. And so that causes problems because insulin is a hormone that tells glucose to go inside the cells. So your glucose stays high, so you're diabetic, high blood glucose, because your pancreas doesn't secrete insulin. And then type 2, sometimes called adult onset, has many names. It's called juvenile diabetes sometimes, lifestyle, other different names, but type 2 diabetes means at some point in your life, they detected that your glucose was high, usually with an A1C test and other things. Type 3 and Alzheimer's, type 3 diabetes and Alzheimer are exactly the same thing, even though people, they won't explain it that way to you. But that's, if you research it, you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, I know I'm repeating myself here, but I think it's so important to understand this. And I stand by this statement. I absolutely stand by it. Using insulin to treat diabetes is insane. There is no recovery from insulin. If you know somebody that's on insulin, or maybe you're on it, I'm gonna warn you that it will get so bad that you will eventually die. Insulin will not save your life. It will put you on the road to death. Now, the reason I say that is because insulin is a very powerful anabolic hormone. What happens is that hopefully they don't put you on insulin unless they try other things like medications like glucophage, metformin. Those are pretty good actually, because those are not hormones. Hormones have no benefit except if you're deficient in that hormone because some gland or organ's not producing it, you may have to take it. But I want you to remember this statement. And if you find an exception to it, let me know. Of all the years I've taught, I've never found a student that have found an exception to it. Hormones have temporary benefits, but long-term detriments, all hormones. Growth hormone, testosterone for men, estrogen for women, temporary benefits, but in the long run, they're very detrimental. They figured that out the hard way with estrogen. Testosterone the same way. Avoid it like the plague, because it'll lead to heart disease, kidney failure, liver cancer, all kinds of things. But insulin works temporarily because what it does, gets in your body, surrounds all your cells, and all your cells have these insulin receptors. When they detect insulin, it tells the cell glucose is in your bloodstream, and the cell takes in glucose. So your blood glucose or blood sugar level goes down, and the cell functions more efficiently, and your A1C, blood sugar, it's good. But why does that cell need so much insulin for the insulin receptors to respond? The insulin receptors on that cell, maybe half of them are burnt out. Well, what burnt them out? Insulin. Insulin's like an acid. It eats away or overworks the insulin receptors. So they start burning out. So that cell doesn't take in glucose. So what happens is there's only a few receptors left. So if all your cells are like that, your blood sugar is high. So to treat it, they give you insulin. It works temporarily, but it overwhelms the cell with the remaining receptors detecting insulin, and it goes in and everything's fine, but it further burns out the remaining receptors. Talk to anybody that's on insulin, that's been on it for years. I guarantee you, they're going to tell you they went up on the dose, went up on the dose, went up on the dose, because they're burning out more and more receptors. And at some point, there's no recovery from it. That's the fate of everybody that takes insulin. I would avoid insulin like the plague. Now, if your doctor has you on insulin, there may be a reason for it because you may have to take it. Don't just come off of it, because if your blood glucose is so high that they have to do something temporarily. But you need to try to wean yourself off of it as much as you can, with your doctor's advice. Make sure the doctor understands diabetes. A friend of mine's a doctor, and he said, yeah, years ago, he said, I think I killed a girl because I was just giving her so much insulin because her blood glucose was so high. And I thought that was an odd statement. He just admitted that he killed her. That's incredible. But that's what happens when you take it, is that temporarily it works. And so guys, I'm gonna give you the last code here in just a few minutes, because I want to do a few questions and answers. What happens is that you take it, like I said, you take it and it works, and you feel better and you function better, and you go to the doctor and they say, we now have your diabetes under control. That sounds like a good thing. But what they really mean is that we're further damaging the receptors because they're just treating the symptoms of diabetes. They're not addressing the disease. Treating the symptoms can actually make the disease worse. They know this with high blood pressure medication. If you're only treating the symptoms, you're not addressing what's going on. You know, I sprained my ankle. I have a broken bone. Oh, give me a pain pill. Pain goes away. I'm treating the symptoms, but I'm not addressing what's really going on. I have a broken bone in the ankle. And that's what's happening with the prescribing of insulin. It's just, to me, it's insane. They're getting people sort of addicted to the drug. Well, you're simply trying to lower blood glucose. You know how you do that? With no money, you save money, even if you don't eat. Now you gotta eat something. But what I'm saying is not eating forces your blood glucose down. It may go down slowly because of your condition, but it will go down. You may have to get in the habit of eating 2 meals a day or 1 meal a day or eating every other day if you're diabetic because of heredity or pre-diabetic, but it will work. It will work in every instance. Even for type 1 diabetics, you can't totally reverse it. But if you go to eating 1 meal a day, you don't have to take insulin all the time. You have to take it maybe once a day rather than 3 times a day, which they give you now because they assume you're going to eat 3 meals a day. And remember, insulin is damaging. And when people say they're born type 1 diabetic, that's impossible. If you were truly type 1 diabetic and your pancreas was making no insulin, you would die in the womb. You could not survive. And so a 3-year-old or somebody's, say as a teenager is 12, they go to the doctor and say, oh, you're type 1 diabetic. You must have been type 1 diabetic your whole life. No, you're probably in between type 1 and type 2. It's almost impossible to be purely type 1 diabetic. That would mean your pancreas is making no insulin, or all your insulin receptors are burnt out. And cells themselves can actually secrete small amounts of insulin. There's other ways that insulin is actually produced besides the pancreas, mainly the pancreas, but there's other things that actually happen in the body. And people just are not, I just think they're just sort of brainwashed with that kind of stuff. I see this all the time. I've had hundreds of instances of students that have maybe even thousands over the years, because I've been teaching this for 20-something years, where students would change their lifestyle and go to 1 meal or 2 meals a day, and they talk about the improvements in their life. It's just amazing to me. That's why I love teaching nutrition, because it makes such a big difference. And you have to promote apoptosis, make yourself pro-apoptotic. If you use those terms, sometimes people can look at you like, what are you talking about? If you say, I eat once a day because it makes me pro-apoptotic, they don't have any clue what you're talking about, probably even the doctor. What that means is promote apoptosis, which means cells committing suicide. And what cells do it? Unhealthy cells, very unhealthy cells. So glucose level needs to oscillate like this, up and down. You don't need to get it so high that you're, diabetic, but it won't stay like that. And you're not so low that you have problems, that your body just won't allow that to happen, but you need that oscillation. Lack of it will actually cause problems. And nutrition, more time between the meals, I guarantee you has that effect. You have to look at the big picture, understand apoptosis, once again, programmed cell death, autophagy, self-eating, and hormesis. You need these 3 things. And I haven't meant you can talk about those without even talking about the food groups. Is it better to do this, better to do that, eat this, don't eat that? That's kind of talking about nutrition at a lower level. You're thinking at a much deeper level than that when you talk about apoptosis and autophagy and things like that. You don't have to understand the details of what's happening, but it's very beneficial. Guys, I want to spend a few minutes. I'm not going to keep you much longer. I'll give you the 3rd code here in a minute. Hopefully we can get some people to ask some questions, because I guarantee you probably heard different, or you may agree or disagree with some of this, and we can discuss it. So anybody wants to ask a question, go ahead. Don't worry about keeping the class longer. This is how you learn. Sometimes I learn things from students too. So anybody have a question on diabetes or want to share a story with me about you or your family? Anybody? I know somebody does. I know what you're thinking. Oh, don't ask the question so we'll end the meeting. Come on, somebody is maybe you have a family member that's taking insulin. You might look at, how much, how often have they gone up in the dose, things of this nature. I'm not an MD. I am a PhD, but I'm not an MD. I don't get hung up on titles or degrees. I don't respect degrees and titles at all. They mean nothing to me. It means you may know. It means you may not know. It doesn't mean anything to me. I don't disrespect them, but I don't respect them either. There's something you have to do to get a job. Doesn't mean you know. But people will often say, well, I'm an MD or I'm a registered dietitian. My response is, okay, I'm a certified scuba diver. I run marathons. What does that have to do with anything? That's just a title. It's what you know. And you got to show why you know certain things to convince people about nutrition, because it's just, in my opinion, it's killing our society. And there's so many things that are happening as far as, in the medical field. I'm not claiming to know more than a doctor, although I've taught anatomy and physiology about medicine. That's a different issue. But I do feel like I know more than most of them about nutrition. Some actually know quite a bit. Some don't. They're kind of old school. But that's why you've got to understand, the deeper level. Okay, somebody has a question. Irene, go ahead, ask.
Yes. So if someone that has diabetes, should they slowly get into the autophagy? Maybe like how you said, twice a day. For how long, or is it?
Yeah, there's a video coming up later one of the videos on autophagy and apoptosis, and the guy will actually talk about it a little bit. But there's no set rule on it. But basically, the longer you go, the more autophagy and apoptosis you'll have. I've heard some say you can do it in 12 hours. I think it takes longer to really get into full apoptosis, which means you get into autophagy too. It takes about a day of not eating. It may be longer than that. When we watch this video on, day off, alternate day fasting, where the days that you eat, you actually have some apoptosis and autophagy, although I don't know if he went into detail on that. But ketone bodies were actually still in the body to a degree, even on days that you eat. I know that's a healthy lifestyle. I know 2 meals a day. Can you be healthy in 3 meals a day? Yes. Based upon heredity and other things. But you're not going to be near as healthy as you could be if you ate 2 meals a day, especially if you ate 1 meal a day. If you eat every other day, I guarantee you'll be healthier. Now, common sense applies. You need enough food, but you don't have to eat twice as much. I had somebody ask me once, what is the healthiest way to eat? Now, this is going to sound like an absurd answer. I don't do this. I wish I had the willpower to do it, and I don't have time to go into tell you what happens on every single day. But if you tell people this, I'm not talking about for children. They're going to look at you and say, that guy's insane. That's okay. That's fine. It's kept me healthy. But although I don't do it to this extreme, would be to eat for 5 days and not eat for the next 5 days. I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can just picture people rolling their eyes. Now that would mean on the 5 days you eat, you can eat more. You don't have to eat once a day on those 5 days. I would say, I did it for a while. I'm not back into that. But I would say eat 2 meals each of those 5 days, because what happens after 1 day of fasting, there's a myriad of things that happen beneficially. After about 5 days of fasting, you've reached kind of the benefit of the upper level of ketone bodies, and there's all kinds of things that are going on. I can name 100 things that are happening. It gets more intense. But after 5 days, now you're just fasting for weight loss. Remember, you can go 60 days. I'm not recommending that. But you have all the benefits, all these myriad of benefits. Your brain is now 90% ketone bodies. And so the next 5 days, you would eat kind of a little bit more, and then 5 on and 5 off, because I know what happens after 5 days. It's absolutely amazing. Somebody texted, do you need to take vitamins and minerals? No, we're going to get more into the next discussion on vitamins and minerals. But no, your body has all these in reserve. Somebody has a question. Linda, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit louder if you would.
Okay, my granddaughter has type 1 diabetes, like you said. what I had a question about was, as you had said about weaning yourself off the insulin.
Yeah.
And I think it was Irene that asked a question about the apoptosis.
Right.
So she's 12. Would you recommend her do that?
Well, I don't know. It's was she diagnosed type 1 diabetic just recently? I bet it was.
No, since she was 5 years old. So she's
Okay.
already been on insulin all these years.
Yeah, that's sad to hear. Sorry to hear that. Since she was 5. So first of all, she nothing against your granddaughter. Hope she can recover from this. But she wouldn't have lived to 5 if she was actually a type 1 diabetic. So even though they diagnosed her type 1, I bet you she's between type 1 and type 2. Otherwise, she wouldn't be alive. She might be more type 1 than type 2. There's a lot of tests they run for that. But I guarantee you, it's now if you're diagnosed type 1, that means your pancreas technically is not making any insulin, so you're going to have to take some. You can't just come off of it. But a little bit of a personal question: does they have her taking insulin? I'm guessing 3 times a day. Is that right?
I think so. When she is with me, because I had to go to a training class in order to even take care of her when she was 5 years old, and we found out she had. But
Yeah.
see, her dad has type 1 diabetes too.
Yeah, so she inherited it.
Yes.
So yeah, they probably have her taking it 3 times a day. I can tell you that's because they some people eat 3 times a day. I would try to get her to eat at least twice a day, maybe once a day. So she only has to take insulin then, because you take it after you eat, you take it before you eat, 30 minutes before you eat, and your blood glucose goes up after you eat. So you have insulin, which helps drive the glucose down. But that insulin, remember, is further damaging the body, not just insulin receptors, another number of other things happen. But she must have some insulin receptors, or else the insulin wouldn't work at all.
Yeah.
So otherwise you would be dead.
Right.
So remember, that insulin is further damaging the insulin receptors. So they're going to go up on her dose. Have they gone up on the dose?
Yes, they have a couple of times.
Yep. And they're going to keep going up and up and up. So try to get her on a 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day so you don't take as much insulin. Insulin receptors, they repair themselves unless they're all burnt out. Say maybe 50% of them are damaged. Did you know that what damaged them? Insulin. So when you reduce the insulin, there is a lot of evidence that the damaged receptors can actually repair themselves, and that cell can reverse itself. So the type 2 diabetes is completely reversible, and I doubt she's completely type 1. I'm not a doctor, not passing myself off as one, but I bet she has some insulin receptors that are damaged, and reduce insulin or get it low in her body every now and then so the damaged receptors can repair themselves. When you bombard that cell with insulin constantly, you're making the situation worse. You're only temporarily making it better. Do you understand? You see what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you gave us that information, because when you said getting more and more and more, it's just making it worse. And that's what's happening with her.
Well, they're addressing the symptoms only.
Right.
And they're making the disease worse, because doctors only treat symptoms. They don't treat diseases. They treat symptoms. And that's what's really sad.
Well, I'm definitely going to tell my daughter about all this information. I really appreciate it.
No, it's no problem. You research it on the internet. The best website to go to is lef.org and read up on diabetes. It's called lef.org. It's actually in the Canvas site. I mentioned that. But they have a lot of current information and what people should be doing, et cetera, and not doing. Anybody else have a question on diabetes? Anything? We'll get more into vitamins and minerals, because that's the vitamin industry is like a multi-billion-dollar hoax. I can tell you right now. There's a video later on called Vitamania that we'll watch. There's a little quiz on it. It's a simple quiz, but that's one of the assignments. It's going to absolutely open your eyes on vitamins. This guy's really good, and he's not a nutritionist. He has a PhD in physics. That's what I like, is because he's not in the area. And some of the stuff that goes on in that industry is just mind-boggling. Vitamins do not cure any disease except the disease caused by a deficiency of that vitamin. So if you have scurvy, take some vitamin C, which is, nobody has scurvy. It's almost unheard of now. We'll talk about the vitamin D misinformation that's out there a lot. Even they promote that with COVID now. Have you heard that? Anybody heard that? Take vitamin D and what else? What mineral? Zinc. I know somebody's heard that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and there may be some evidence for that, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about vitamin D and kind of in another session, and kind of there's 5 different types and what's actually happening in your body. I want you to remember this about vitamins and minerals. You can take them in, you can eat them, you can inject them into your bloodstream. Nobody does that, but you can put them in your body. It doesn't mean they're in you. They go to your stomach, they're not in you. When they go into the small intestine, they're still not in you. They go from the small intestine in the bloodstream, they're still not in you. You can do a blood test, but it doesn't mean anything. Well, that's a different issue. It's not in you. It's only in you when a cell takes it in. That's when it does something, is when it gets inside of the cell. And so that's why a lot of blood tests they tell what's in the bloodstream, but what actually gets inside the cell. Cells do not take in more than they need. They're very smart. You take an extra vitamin D, you take an extra zinc, you eat too much, your glucose level is high, your cells won't take it in. They won't take any of that stuff in. So your body just gets rid of it. So just because you take something doesn't mean it's actually in you. Cells will reject all that stuff. So the basic rule of vitamins, you can take extra, but most of the time they're not doing anything because you're not deficient in any of those. It's pretty rare to be deficient in a vitamin. Temporarily, you can be rare. But if you can go 60 days without eating before you starve to death, what do you die of? You die from lack of food. You die because there's not enough glucose. You do not die from lack of vitamin D, calcium, B12. None of these things kill you. What kills you is lack of food. So your body at least has 2 months of reserves, 2 months of all of this. So if you don't eat for 5 days, you don't have to take any of this. Your body has it. In fact, you have 2 years worth of vitamin B12 stored in your liver, 2 years. Now, so is taking extra have some benefit? With B12, it might. We'll get into that later. That's one of the energy vitamins. Anyway, guys, I'm going to give you the last 3 codes. It's 4, 5, 3. So when we finish here in like 2 minutes, take the little quiz so you get your 15 points. I'm going to tweak this video, upload it if you want to watch a little bit of information later. Okay, guys? All right, I'm going to end the meeting. You guys.
Professor?
One question. Hold on. Go ahead, Jasmine. Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know if I missed the second code.
Okay, I'll give you the 3 codes again. 356, 362, 453. It's a free 15 points, okay?
Got it.
All right, guys.
Hey, Professor?
You have one question. Go ahead. Anybody?
No, I'll ask it later. That's all right.
Okay, all right. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.